D3 in COVID.
Grazie mille Giuseppe. Io sono un inglese abitando in Umbria, devo parlare in inglese. Allora, my subject is vitamin D3 deficiency, innate immune system and COVID-19. Next slide, please. I've co-authored a book last year with Dr. David Grimes, who's much more knowledgeable, or maybe I'll say even more knowledgeable than I am about vitamin D. And this is the book, which is translated into Italian. I've got copies here. I'm very happy to send either the English or the PDF version to anybody who gives me a copy. And for the press, they can have a hard copy if they will use it. Next slide. This is just a very, very simple diagram stolen from somewhere on the mechanism of action of vitamin D. Now, it's very important to realize that vitamin D is an essential natural compound that you can really only get it from the action of ultraviolet light on your skin. Ultraviolet light of a particular wavelength, which even in Italy, the sun is only high enough for 6 or 7 months of the year to get it, and that's if you go out at midday. So there is a major problem with vitamin D deficiency, which is absolutely worldwide. But vitamin D is also a hormone made in the kidney, acting on the gut and the bones to control the level of ionized calcium. That is the system that most people think. Most people think of it as a hormone, but in fact it almost certainly evolved as an intracellular, much before, at least 500 million years ago, it's been around, vitamin D3. And if you think of it as a dietary component, that is dangerous because fish, it's true, make vitamin D, well, they actually get it from eating plankton, but they don't do it for our benefit. So vitamin D binds to a receptor, and that then binds to vitamin A receptor, and the heterodimer acts on the DNA. And this is vital for at least 1,000 human genes. Something around 3% of our genome is vitamin D dependent. And this is really important. It's another, next slide, please. Next slide. Oh, my God. I just want to mention a thing called the law of mass action. Now, it's really important to realize that because vitamin D, or 1,25-dihydroxyvitamin D, is a hormone, in other words, it circulates in the blood from A to B, it's very important if it's produced and used locally for it to be destroyed locally. So we see here that the immunocytes, the immune system draws, and it's absolutely vital for control of immunity, to have a good supply of 25-hydroxyvitamin D, or calcifidiol, which is made in the liver. And that is the circulating reservoir form. It's inactive in itself, but it is essential for all the purposes vitamin D is used for. And so at the bottom I said 125 in the cells has to be destroyed, and it's to be, as soon as it's freed from its receptor, it's destroyed. And we have a condition called sarcoidosis that causes hypercalcemia because this part of the system isn't controlled. So the enzyme 24-hydroxylase that destroys 125 is induced by 125. You have to have a good reserve of vitamin D, not a fiddly little reserve, say in England and Britain, they say 400 units. That will stop you getting rickets. How many people in this room have rickets? Please put up your hands. Not very many. Next slide. This is a system, just again stolen from the internet, but this is just to show the complexity. At the top left, we have the innate immune system. The innate immune system is vitamin D dependent. Vitamin D induces production of cathelicidin and defensin that destroys viruses. So this virus that we've got, if you've got a decent level of vitamin D, there's no surprise why you get a mild condition. It's destroyed. And the whole of the part on the right is the acquired immune system. Look at all the red lines showing the things to do with inflammation, interleukins and substances that vitamin D has to switch off to stop you going from what an earlier speaker talked about as the first phase, the early phase, to the phase that kills you. Vitamin D deficiency is not a drug. Vitamin D is not a drug. It's a natural compound, and you've got to have enough. Next slide, please. Now, you can get enough in Italy. Italy is a very strange country, as I found when it took me an hour to get in here. And obviously, I live in Italy. But you can buy over the counter in any pharmacy. You can buy vials of vitamin D, and you can also buy the reservoir form, 24-hydroxyvitamin D. Next slide, please. And these are the vials. My wife and I take one vial. Obviously, we don't eat the glass. We break it, shake it onto a bit of bread. We have excellent Umbrian olive oil, and we eat the olive oil once a month. That is enough to maintain our vitamin D level at over 40 nanograms per mil, which means that we will never get severe COVID unless they manage to mutate it by ignoring all the data that is being ignored. At the bottom is 5 vials of calcifediol, which is 25-hydroxyvitamin D. And that costs, the vials cost €8 a year, and the capsules will cost you €4 or €5 a year, €9 a year, sorry. Next slide. Now, I want to tell you now, therefore, briefly about the Cordoba randomized controlled trial, because one of the things in this pandemic that is disastrous is vitamin D has just been completely suppressed. As you can see, there's no money in vitamin D. No money for Big Pharma, and Big Pharma depends upon us being D deficient for all sorts of allergic disorders, high incidence of cancer. I mean, vitamin D is absolutely central for internal and external protection. In what they did in Cordoba, they had the bright idea. They did a randomized controlled trial of calcifediol, which, as I said, they spent €4.50 per patient cured. And this was a small trial, but a very powerful one, of 76 patients, of whom 25 were allocated they were controlled. They had all the best treatment, azithromycin and everything else that they were giving. And the others, 50, got calcifediol, 25-hydroxy-D as well. And their endpoint was, these were people admitted to hospital, severe enough to be admitted to hospital, and of the group that got just the normal treatment, 13 went into ICU and 2 of them died. Of the other group, 1 person went into ICU, and nobody died. And the reference at the bottom, which is obliterated, but it shows that the p-value for this small trial is less than 1 in 60,000. This is cast iron, and it's been reproduced in Andalusia on 900 patients, still totally ignored by governments, some of them not 1,000 miles from here. The British government behaviour absolutely outrageous. Next slide, please. Now, these are just papers, I took from the Vitamin D Wiki. Go to Vitamin D Wiki, and this is since March of this year. All of these papers show the importance of D deficiency in your risk of COVID. see blacks, black people, dark skin, Asians and people from Africa, they, even if they get enough sun, which is very difficult for us to get, almost impossible in Scotland, for example, where I did my medical degree, 90% are D deficient at the end of winter. Next slide. Now, I'm going to, this is taken from UK government statistics. Let's look at on the left, mixed race, Chinese, Indian, other, Bangladeshi, Pakistani, and the mortality, you're 4 to 5 times as likely to die from COVID if your skin is dark. Now, that is denied in Britain. Nobody talks about it. Next slide. Now, I've got very briefly, 3 personal studies. The first was that living in Italy and having access to vials of vitamin D, I contacted, my wife said, well, in Britain there must be an organization that deals with black and Asian doctors. And I linked up with BAPIO, which is the British Association for Physicians of Indian Origin. And I contacted one of my co-authors, Professor Paraj Singhal, and we got these vials out because what we said, as David Grimes mentioned yesterday, of the first 26 doctors to die in Britain, looking after COVID patients, 25 were black or Asian minorities. And BAPIO, we sent these vials out, and you can see the results there. It's an earlier slide, but the results were very impressive. 17 of the people who took the vials got COVID, because it doesn't stop you getting COVID or any other cold, but none of them died. This is the study. That's that there. And we've also given calcividiol cap and D3 vials to Safdarjung Hospital in Delhi in May of this year. Next slide. And, oh gosh, I got out of order. Anyway, basically the results were that of 49 patients in ICU given calcividiol, one of those 5 capsules given when the patients some of the patients were dying, of the 9 that were on a ventilator already, they all died. They got it too late. Of the 40 that weren't on a ventilator, none died, and they all recovered. They all went out. And the same thing applied to the less ill, who were they gave them 600,000 units of vitamin D, and they also gave 130 people coming to the hospital worried about it, just gave them 1 vial. And of those, 128 didn't get ill, 2 got mildly sick. This is my final idea, more or less. Some very interesting considerations for the NIAID. On the top left, you'll see there's a mouse, to the left. And what I've done is scaled up a mouse to 60 kilograms, which is the weight, that's roughly what Dr. Fauci weighs. And you calculate their requirement. This is what we give mice in the laboratory. We give them the equivalent, a scaled up mouse, scaled up to a human 600 kilograms, receives the equivalent of 6,000 units a day in the laboratory. Can you go back a bit? Go back 1. Okay. So I had a slide, I thought, of Dr. Fauci. I was thinking, because in this COVID pandemic, we've got the idea of a humanized mouse. And I thought, thinking of it from the point of view of a really big 60-kilogram mouse, it would be quite nice to have a mouse-sized human. Next slide. So finally, recommendations for universal global D repletion. Normal adults everybody should take 2,000 to 4,000 units daily of D3, or 10,000 units to 25 a week, or as I do, 100,000 units a month. That will set you back €8 a year. Elderly, obese and pregnant should get double. Children should get roughly half. COVID-19 infected and well, give them calcividiol capsules. COVID-19 infected ill, give them calcividiol capsules. And we should all have our vitamin D level measured at least once a year. And you can take this safely throughout the year. Just forget about go to the beach because you like getting a suntan, but do not rely on nature. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time. And now I invited